Hey, Kevin. Hey, folks. Glad to have you. It's Wednesday noon. It's time for another Facebook Live brought to you by New Mexico in Focus and New Mexico PBS. Appreciate you spending some time with us. If you're watching this after the noon hour on Wednesday, thank you for joining us as well. Appreciate it. You see Laura Paskus there. If you watch our show, you're familiar with her face and her wonderful environmental work she's been doing with us regarding, of course, PFAS on our military installments around the state, but she does a lot more than that, certainly, as you know, as a watcher. And we've got some things to talk about today. This Friday night, Laura is going to be talking about monsoon and how it's been affected by climate change here in our state, how we're dealing with it, as well as we're going to discuss, of course, what came out on Monday, which is the new IPCC report on climate change. It's been heralded all week as something we all need to pay attention to starting now. So I want to welcome Laura. Thank you. Before I forget, she is also an author. I am so sorry. The name of the book is At the Precipice, Mexico's Changing Climate. And I'm very pleased to bring Laura Paskus to our Facebook Live. Laura, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Gene. It's really nice to be talking to you today.
Absolutely. It's good stuff. Let's talk about monsoon. It's on everyone's minds. We got a lot of moisture coming down, seemingly out of nowhere. If you've moved here in the last 10 years, you might not know what this is about. But drought followed by heavy water. There's something going on here with a pattern here. What's happening? Why is it so hot and then so wet?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on Friday night, we're going to have Daniel Porter from the National Weather Service here in Albuquerque on the show. Mm-hmm. And he talks with me about our current monsoon season in lots of places around the state. A few weeks ago, we saw like major flooding in places like Doña Ana County and Carlsbad. And that's really a part of a pattern that we're seeing globally, which is an intensification of our water cycle. Mm-hmm. And so at the same time that we have things like the Rio Grande going dry and super hot days, we can also have these very localized storms that dump a ton of water in one place. And that can help. If there's sustained rains over a period of time, that can help alleviate drought conditions in some ways, but it also contributes to flooding, problems with infrastructure, and a lot of that just sort of whooshes and runs off. You hope that it collects in the reservoirs, but yeah, it's a part of this experiment we're seeing across our planet, really.
That's right. You know, one of the terms that's sort of out there, maybe not fully in the public's purview, but I know a lot of scientists are using the idea of a compound extreme event, meaning it's not just one thing, but things, because of the cycle we're in, I think this is what you're saying here, we can expect more to happen, even if it's just rain or just heat. Am I on the correct path there?
Yeah, that's such a great point. And so this is something that we see here in the state and is also emphasized in the IPCC report you mentioned that came out on Monday. And so what that really means is, like, just to give some examples of things that we see here in New Mexico and we'll see more and more is drought, which is a lack of precipitation on top of rising temperatures. So that increases acidification. But you also have things like a longer growing season on top of less water supply, or more extreme weather events, those early freezes, those wind events that knock your orchard trees down, flooding that ruins your chili crop. Also things like drought plus wind, drying out your soils, causing dust storms, driving wildfires. And then things like you have a forest fire in your watershed, and that denudes the landscape and affects the whole watershed downstream. So it's not just rising temperatures or just drought, it's all these things that interact with one another.
It's that, you know, when you go through that list, I'm also hearing dollar signs. We're seeing dollar signs. This costs money to manage, it would seem to me. If you're a farmer, if you're growing anything, you've got to change your whole game now. Is that something you guys are going to be talking about on Friday night as well? How folks are responding to climate change?
Yeah, we're not talking about that specifically on Friday night, but we do have some shows coming up later in the summer and into the fall looking at how climate change, whether it's water insecurity or these extreme weather events, how these are happening and compounding and affecting food supplies in the short term and the long term,
Right.
in terms of like not just the prices you pay, but what's actually going to be available in supermarkets and how farmers can make a living. It's already a tough business where people rely very heavily on federal subsidies in particular to even survive. So what does our food supply look like in a climate changed world?
Mhm. For folks who may not know, how close are we to dead center here in New Mexico for the idea of drought coming in the next, 10 to 20 years? Are we vulnerable here in New Mexico?
So that's such a great question. One of the things when I was looking through the IPCC report yesterday, kind of like looking, obviously, this looks at the entire globe, and impacts across the entire planet, but the southwestern United States makes quite a few specific appearances,
Mhm.
which is pretty uh, disheartening. But so one of the things that really jumped out at me is, these reports look at sort of models into the future. What will happen with temperature rises if we emit fewer greenhouse gases, if we continue on the track we're on, if we emit even more, and lays out these different scenarios. And so in the IPCC report that came out on Monday, it says, even under a low emission scenario, the likelihood of extreme drought increases by 100%. And it lists a number of places, and southwestern North America is the first place on that list.
Wow.
So even if we do a great job cutting our emissions, we're still facing these really extreme drought conditions into the future.
Absolutely. We might as well get right to it. The UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, we hear us refer to them as the IPCC, of course. And on Monday, as Laura mentioned, they published their, I don't know how else to say it, their clearest picture yet on the updated science of planetary heating. I mean, it really, in case nobody knows, it's nearly 4,000 pages. It's pretty long. I haven't gotten through it personally. I'm still getting there. Authored by 234 scientists from 66 nations. Over 500 other scientists contributed to that report, and emphasizes that climate change is widespread and, as Laura just said, intensifying. And that's the part, Laura, that really kind of blew me away here, that even if we did everything we could right now, we're still going to have a lot of rising happening over the next 30 years or so. In your view, how does this increase the will to make change, knowing this now?
Yeah, I mean, we've known about climate change for a long time.
Yeah.
And we've known, even these IPCC reports have been coming out since 1990. And they've said the same thing, just with increasing urgency and increasing certainty over the past 3 decades.
Mhm.
And yet, as a society, particularly industrialized nations like the United States, we have not committed, even with the best available science in front of us, we've not committed to cutting our greenhouse gas emissions in any serious ways. And I think, I think it is hard for people to think, when a big report like this comes out and it makes headlines for a couple of days, people think, holy smokes, we are so in so much trouble. What's the point of even trying if, like you noted, the impacts are going to continue even if we stopped emitting greenhouse gases today? But I think it's easy to get caught up in the sort of hopelessness and despair, but we have the knowledge that we need, we have the tools we need.
Mhm.
It's just making sure that we are ready and able to commit to future generations, because right now we do have the tools to stave off the worst of the impacts that reports like this portray. Every day that we wait, every year, every generation that we pass this on to, they have less and less time and fewer tools and opportunities. So I think that we should really take this moment as like this really exciting moment to say, like, enough. Like, we're done messing around as a species. We're going to tackle this.
I got a question for you from our Facebook thread. Appreciate it. From Colton. Asks, how can New Mexico, a landlocked high desert, prepare for climate change?
That's a great question.
Mhm.
So one of the biggest things we need to be doing as a state is water planning.
Right.
And there are plans and discussions and programs underway. As far as I understand it, they are woefully underfunded by the legislature. If you look at various um, initiatives in the state that we commit to funding, water planning has not traditionally been one of them. So water planning under the umbrella of we already know that we're going to have less water in our system. We're going to have this intensified hydrological system. We know what's coming. So let's be planning given those constraints and those realities. So that's a big one. New Mexico really needs to grapple with the fact that we are an oil and gas producing state. We are directly responsible for the changing of the climate that we are experiencing so intensely already. So we really need, as a state, to come to terms with, do we value our agriculture and the future of our landscapes and communities and rivers, or do we value oil and gas extraction? Because those things are at odds with one another. And it's a tricky, complicated issue, and I am confident that we can find solutions. So those are really two of the big things. Then there's kinds of all sorts of community pieces to that too. If you live in a place where you're vulnerable to wildfire, making sure your community is fire-wise, being cautious and careful about where we build, ensuring that our buildings moving forward are energy efficient and also able to keep families and people safe during extreme heat events. So there's so much that we can be doing.
I'm interested in listening to you say this, because when I think about, or if I try to put myself in the place of people in municipalities, city government, county government, you've got to start planning for a much different, sort of scene outside, where at your bus stops, how long people walk to certain things. I mean, there's a lot of impact with heat when it comes to elderly people. Our ages, our average age is creeping up here in New Mexico. We have a lot to think about when it comes to managing heat and how we do our day-to-day lives. What's your sense of how you're hearing governments respond to this so far?
Yeah, so I spoke with someone in the sustainability office in Las Cruces, and this was a few years ago now, but had like a fascinating conversation with her about the issues that they're looking at and planning for and facing. And these things are all tied in with like zoning and planning and kind of the day-to-day government issues. And so thinking about, if you're looking at a 5-degree increase in hot days, that's the difference between 103 and 108 in places in southern New Mexico, or even more. So it's not safe for people to be living in, say, cinder block construction homes with evaporative coolers, because above a certain temperature, swamp coolers just don't cool you off. And so what are we doing to ensure people are safe? And you bring up a really great point about bus stops and people who have to walk to work or bike to work. We really have to be taking care of one another and using all the tools that we have, from local laws and regulations and planning and zoning all the way up to the federal level.
I got to ask you, as an author, obviously you lean into this. I would encourage folks to go to the UNM Press website to get a hold of Laura's book, by the way. Do you have any recommendations for folks who are now saying, you know what, I need to learn a bit more about this? I'm behind. Do you have any publications you could recommend, or books you could recommend to folks out there to get them caught up on all this?
Yeah, gosh, there's so many great books out right now. You know, one that I really love that Bill DeBuise wrote a few years ago is called The Great Aridness, that focuses on the Southwest. John Fleck has written a couple of books about the Colorado River specifically, but Elizabeth Colbert has a new book out about climate change, and her older book, Field Notes from a Catastrophe, is amazing.
Mhm.
There's Michael Mann has a book out right now that is focused on the, kind of why the climate is changing, how the climate is changing, but also how, big business and corporations have have helped us feel despairing
Right.
about this. And I would be happy to kind of like write up a little list for people, and we can post that on Facebook or wherever it would be useful, because there's so many great books out there right now that look at climate change from all different kinds of angles.
I love it. That'd be a great list. The reason I ask you that, and I know you know this, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but this is an age of cynicism. And I get frustrated. I'm sure you get terribly frustrated with the idea that folks try to tell people that even a 1 degree Celsius change has enormous ramifications for the planet, for wildlife, for plants, for how we farm, how we eat, how we fuel our vehicles, everything, let alone 2.7, which is some of the predictions coming, which would have enormous consequences for our oceans, our rivers, our lakes. I mean, no part of the world is going to be untouched by this. And we were not joking, we're saying off air just before we went on, I checked some of the foreign TV news just before we went on. It was all about fires. Every story was about a fire. Greece is having a hard time right now. It's just really a pall of smoke over a lot of the European countries right now. And it's really kind of a difficulty. How do we punch through this cynicism, this age of cynicism, to say, folks, you have a hand in this. You can either make it worse by your own actions, or you can make it better by your own actions as well. What's it going to take, do you think, to flip people here?
Yeah, some people are probably really sick of me hearing me say this, but I believe that this is true. It is a matter of connecting in joy and love with our landscapes, our rivers, and our communities.
Love it.
For example, it's really hard to see our Rio Grande dry in the summer and be as low as it is even through Albuquerque right now. And I can look at that river and cry, and I do sometimes. And I cry and I feel so hopeless and angry and frustrated and like a failure. Or I can go out there and go for a run or a walk or wading in the river, and I can see what birds are there, and I can bring people I love to that place and share that place. And I think by connecting with our places, and here in New Mexico, we have the best places. We connect in love and joy with these places. We will protect them. We will see how they're changing, and we have a personal stake in protecting them. And when a number of people have talked about how one of the most important things in terms of adaptation to climate change is community. And if you have a close community, if you are a community of people who care about one another, you'll take care of one another. And so I know that's like kind of a cheesy answer, but it's the one that gets me through every day of feeling like this is big, and what part can I play? I can connect and I can love and I can think about how to face these challenges.
Good points there. And I gotta imagine the easier push might be, I'm guessing here, but might be with children versus cynical adults who don't want to hear anything. Is that part of the plan here? No, not the plan. It's not a good way to put it. Is part of the education to educate young kids to get them to care about the planet, maybe just a little bit more than their parents did?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, young people today, they understand the climate is changing. They understand why. They understand what's going to happen. They understand that adults are failing them.
Right.
And they're in many ways angry. And there are also many of the youth activists I meet are like, all right, yeah, we're taking charge. You guys haven't had the strength or the perseverance to tackle this. So we'll You left us with fewer tools and less time, but
That's
we'll
right.
take care of this.
I got a point from the thread, comment thread. Appreciate it. It's from Leah. Thank you, Leah. She makes an interesting point here. Leah says, grow hemp to fight climate change and that the tarpine pinon blocks up rays. That's an interesting point there. Hemp is the thing right now, isn't it? I mean, getting farmers to adopt low water use crops, how hard has that been? And do we have a better chance going forward?
Yeah. So one, I would put a plug in for the Growing Forward podcast.
Yay.
And they're tackling that podcast here at KNME in collaboration with New Mexico Political Report and KUNM, really looking at these issues and recreational cannabis and hemp and the sorts of challenges and changes. So there's that. Anytime we talk about making agricultural changes, it can be tricky. It's like, there's technological changes, there's cultural adaptations, there's investments, but there also sometimes we mess up. And I'm not saying this with hemp because I don't know enough about it, but sometimes we encourage changes and we don't know there are unintended consequences. And just as an example, years ago, there was this move in the lower Rio Grande in New Mexico around Doña Ana County and the Elephant Butte Irrigation District to move farmers away from low income crops like alfalfa, for instance, and to transition toward pecans and orchards. And what happened was they kind of, you can fallow your alfalfa field in a bad year and not lose your entire farm.
Right.
If you can't fallow your orchards.
Right.
So, it's these sorts of changes require a lot of effort and thought. And I hope that hemp is a positive change for New Mexico's farmers, but I'm not up to date on that issue in particular.
We'll leave that for the folks down at New Mexico State. They're all over that. They got the hemp thing down on lock. So I love it. Laura, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us. This is, this week especially, it really lined up. We get a lot of great feedback whenever you're doing something on the show. And Friday night, of course, I want folks to tune in to see that interview Laura talked about earlier that she's going to have. But then also do yourself a favor and backstop your knowledge with the IPCC report. The links are everywhere out there. It's not hard to find. There are basically, like everything else, an executive summary. There's ways to get into specifics about the Southwest, so you don't have to slog through 4,000 pages if you don't want to. But at the same time, the stuff about the Southwest is shocking. So, maybe this is one of those moments we want to walk into it, Laura. We want to be shocked maybe a little bit in a credible way and sort of get us into another frame of mind. I mean, this is my hope anyway from this report,
Yeah, and people, as you understand it and read through it, make sure that your legislators and your local officials also understand it. These reports are exciting when they come out and they drop out of the news almost immediately. So let's not let that happen here in New Mexico.
Bless your heart for saying that. Absolutely. All right, folks, Friday night, 7 o'clock, channel 5.1. You'll see my colleague Laura Paskus do her thing, as well as myself with a good group at the round table, virtually, of course, at 7 o'clock as well. So thank you again, Laura Paskus. Really appreciate it. And folks, thank you for joining us again. If you're not here for the original noon hour, do it next week. We try to do it every week at Wednesday. Sometimes we're an hour off here or there, depending on schedule, but you can rely on us to be around midweek. Thanks again, guys. Have a great day. Stay cool.
Thanks, Gene.
See you Friday night.